Uh, from the fourth Imam onwards, the Shias always talk about the explicit appointment of the next Imam, because we have quite clear evidence that at the death of Ali ibn Abi Talib, he appointed Hassan, and at the death of Hassan, Hassan appointed Hussein. But for the rest of the Imams, then we have got explicit appointment, and each Imam would appoint the Imam after him. The appointment of Ali Zayn Al-abedin, of course, took place in very painful circumstances, more painful than normal, because each Imam would be appointed at the death or dying stage of the Imam before him. But this particular case, it was in Karbala, which was a very sad event from many points of view, and we find that in Al-Kafi, there are many reports. I brought you one from Al-Kafi, that when Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salam was approaching his last moments, he called for his daughter Fatima al-Kubra and gave her a wrapped book and gave his will. This is a hadith from Imam al-Baqir that Kulaini quotes in Al-Kafi. Ali bin Hussein was present in the room but was very ill and was lying on his bed, but obviously witnessing what is transpiring. And then later on, Fatima gave him these books, which were sacraments, which were trusts of the imamate. And then Imam Bakr says that, I swear by God, these are the same things that have now come to me, and I will pass them to the next Imam. And within these books are contained whatever is necessary for humankind from the time of Adam till the end of the world. Kulaini also reports that when Al-Hussein wanted to go to Iraq, he entrusted his grandmother Salama with certain information and books which he had himself received from Al-Hassan, and said that when Zayn al-Abedin comes back to Medina, please give them to him, and these are amongst the signs of the imamate. Now, we don't need to go into exactly what these books contained, whether it was information, whether these imams somehow learned from these books. I don't think the imams necessarily learned from these books. The books were books of reference. They contain information that was passed down from the Prophet's time. It seems that the imams reached the state of imamate in something that is much more spiritual than learning from a book. And the office of imamate, of course, in Shia imamology and Shia theology, is an office that has got definitely a spiritual component to it. And it is an office that they cannot, for example, abdicate. Hassan ibn Ali did not abdicate his imamah. There are clues in other things that imams sometimes have let slip that gives us indication of how this process happened. But because theology is not our topic in this particular session, I will just hint at one or two. For example, we have that Imam al-Jawad is asked about this, and he said that when your father died, he was in Tus, he was in Khurasan, and you were in Medina. How did you know that you had now the Imam? And Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam replied by saying that I was in Medina when I felt an intense humility and humbleness cloak me. And as a result, I realized that I have now assumed the office of imamah. These are just words they use, but nonetheless, when one imam transfers this responsibility to another, it is something that happens in the spiritual realm. Not just a book is passed on and that the next imam has access to knowledge through that book. Rather, they have access to knowledge because of a spiritual upliftment that they experience that allows them to access knowledge of ghaib at will. About Imam Sajjad, we have relatively little information about what happens in his life in the early part of his life, mainly because, of course, he was surrounded by the other imams. I mean, even he even saw the time of Ali ibn Abi Talib, his own grandfather, although he was only an infant at the time. Ali was alive till 40 age, and so for 2 years, I suppose, he was with his grandfather, and then under his uncle Al-Hassan, and then later on his father Al-Hussein. So by the time Karbala rolls around, he is a young man of 23 years of age. Because of circumstances, well, the circumstances of his illness, he did not participate, and in that way, if you like, survived to lead the Muslim Ummah. For certainly he would have participated if he was not ill. But he had been overcome with a fever and an illness that did not allow him to participate the way the others had participated in the Battle of Karbala. However, we have riwayat about his conduct, his piety, his worship, even from the earliest days, which maybe it would be instructive to look at one or two of them. He had a tremendous respect for his parents. We have conduct with him with his mother, his foster mother, which showed the high regard he had for her. For example, it is said that he would not eat at the same time as his mother. So he would sit with his mother, his foster mother, and allow her to eat. And only when she had finished eating would he eat. And although she would be very insistent that, please eat, he explained later on that I would not have liked to reach for a morsel, that my mother already had an idea that she wanted that morsel. And this was his tremendous akhlaq. And later, of course, he freed this woman who was his foster mother, who had breastfed him as a baby because his own mother had passed away. He always used to call her mother. He freed her and allowed her to marry one of his slaves, whom he also freed, and he gave them from his own wealth so that they would live comfortably. And he always held her in very high regard. The same is found of his conduct with other servants in his household. We have a report that this is from Tabarsi's Alam al-Wara, that once one of his servants was giving water to him for doing wudu. And out of some carelessness, the jug of water fell and hit the Imam on the face and injured him. So he looked up at her, and immediately she recited a verse of the Quran, and she said to him, وَالْقَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظِ. This is from Surah Ali Imran. Allah loves those people who restrain their anger. So he said to her, كَظَمْتُ غَيْظِي. I have swallowed my anger. I have controlled my anger. So she read the next part of the verse, وَالْعَافِينَ عَلَى النَّاسِ, and those who forgive. And he said, I have forgiven you. And then she read the last portion of the verse, which says, وَاللَّهُ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Allah loves those who do good. And he said to her, I have freed you for God's pleasure. Of course, here showing that Imam alayhi salam wanted to reward a servant, for example, who had some ma'rifah, some knowledge of religion. She was able to quote a verse of the Quran, and she showed that she had an awareness of Islam, and he said, I free you. There are many other reports like that about his worship, for example, from his son Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, who says that my father used to prostrate frequently. Whenever he would recount God's pleasure, God's favor to him, he would go into sajda. Whenever he read a verse of the Quran that talk about prostration, he would go to sajda. Whenever a difficulty had been averted or a misfortune had been averted, he would prostrate. Whenever he finishes obligatory prayers, he would go into long sajda. And it didn't matter where he was. If he was riding and something struck him, he would get down from the horse and do sajda. And Imam al-Baqir says, and that is why my father, one of his titles or one of his